The man at the gate wore a uniform starched stiff with protocol. His voice, clipped and professional, cut through the summer air like a reprimand. "Ma'am, you're not on the guest list." I blinked against the late afternoon sun, hands tightening around the invitation in my coat pocket. The white envelope had no seal, just my name and my own handwriting, a quiet note to myself to show up, even when every reason not to had clawed at me for days. Behind the security checkpoint, the Grand Hall of Fort Liberty shimmered under floodlights and bunting. Military bands warmed up somewhere out of sight. Guests gathered in small, neat clusters, admirals, brass-laced spouses, bright-eyed recruits posing in perfect posture. And Aaron, my brother, standing just inside the glass atrium. He looked every inch the soldier, sharp, tall, medals aligned like a statement. He leaned toward his wife and said something with a grin. She laughed politely, then followed his eyes toward the gate. Toward me. "That's my sister," I read his lips as he motioned lazily. "Strictly a pencil pusher. Should have married a field officer, not buried herself in paperwork." I couldn't hear the laughter, but I knew the shape of it. Polite. Harmless, maybe, but it landed like a slap. The guard at the gate glanced back at me. "Name again, ma'am?" I met his eyes. "Commander Rachel Monroe, Office of Naval Intelligence." He paused. His gaze flickered down toward my civilian coat. The dress whites underneath weren't visible. Neither was the medal in my bag. Neither was anything really. Just a woman in black slacks and low heels, out of place at the center of military celebration. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not listed." I nodded once slowly. No anger. Just the cold recognition of habit. The kind that came from years of being sidelined in rooms built for glory, not quiet work. Aaron turned away. Already laughing again. He had no idea. No idea what I'd done. Or what I'd withheld. The line between protection and invisibility had grown thin over the years. The mission that saved his convoy never had a code name. No operation badge, no photo, no memory for him to carry. Just a detour, one he never knew had been planned, calculated, and executed from a desk in D.C. He texted me that night. "Hope D.C. isn't too boring, sis." I never replied. And yet I'd come. To sit in the second row uninvited. To watch him be honored and wonder how many more times I'd have to stand in the shadow of someone I'd already saved. But not tonight. Tonight would end differently. The bridge across the Tennessee River was long, low, and shimmering with the late afternoon sun. I kept the window down just enough to feel the air against my cheek, warm, metallic, and laced with the softness I remembered from 1,000 drives long before. The road curled gently as I crossed, pulling me back. Years ago, I stood in the back of a community college gymnasium, clapping for Aaron's ROTC Scholarship Award. He was 18, tall already, and flushed with pride. Our mother had dabbed at her eyes with a napkin folded in her purse. Our father had shaken Aaron's hand so tightly it looked painful. There were photos. Speeches. A cake with blue frosting. No one noticed I had driven up from Annapolis that morning. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. That night, I returned to D.C. in silence, a plaque still in my bag, the National Data Security Prize for undergrad research. I left it on my desk the next morning and never mentioned it again. Mom never asked. But her quiet that weekend said more than any question might have. I remember standing in the hallway as she helped Aaron pack for his first training. She asked if he needed sunscreen, socks, whether he remembered the insect repellent. She turned toward me just once, held my eyes for a second longer than usual. "You should come meet the new widower from the Rotary Club," she'd said softly. "He's very stable. Reminds me of your Uncle Charles." I smiled. Said I'd think about it. I never did. When I joined military intelligence, my father, Colonel James Monroe, had scoffed with the tired disdain of a man who still thought the Pentagon was built only for warriors. "Support roles aren't service," he'd said from behind his Wall Street Journal. "They're sidelines. People who file reports so others can act." The words never left. They calcified somewhere beneath the surface. I carried them like a second ID badge, invisible but always there. Even now. But the vault was real. And once not long ago, inside its reinforced walls, I sat at a console under red emergency lighting and rerouted a signal meant to kill Aaron and 11 others. We called it a possible operational misfire. Internally, it was flagged as high priority, unknown threat source. I saw the coordinates. Knew the origin point. Made the call in under 6 minutes. Then watched the screen as the convoy veered off the marked route. I never told him. The report was sealed in a restricted annex that would remain classified for another 20 years. That night, Aaron texted me. Hope DC isn't too boring, sis. I watched the message blink for a while, then powered my phone off and stared at the blank screen. 4th of July was always the worst. Aaron would bring his ribbons and his stories. Dad would beam. Mom would pour lemonade and nod along. Once after the fireworks, she pulled me aside gently as if she meant it kindly. There's this man from church, a pilot. Lost his wife to cancer. Very traditional but open-minded. I think you do well together. That was 2 years after the cyber intrusion brief that landed in the president's morning folder. I was the one who wrote it. Some of us never got medals. Just new passwords. And locked doors. Back on the Tennessee Bridge, the light shifted on the water below. My hands were steady on the wheel. I wasn't angry. I'd just grown tired of being erased. And tonight that ends. The vault was 3 stories underground, accessible only through biometric scan and 2 rotating clearance codes. No phones. No windows. Just screens and silence and the endless hum of servers. Officially, I worked in strategic data analysis. Unofficially, I'd spent the last 6 years tracking operations that never made headlines. One of them, Operation Tundra Sky, was scrubbed before it happened. A missile in transport. The guidance systems compromised mid-transit. I caught the code anomaly in a line of diagnostics flagged for routine review. The algorithm had skipped over it. But I didn't. It was just a flicker, a subscript shift in a line of coordinate data. I traced it back, cross-checked a half-dozen logs, and found the tampering. The missile's intended path? A desert road near Mosul. Scheduled to pass a small convoy of Allied vehicles that night. My brother's convoy. I'd called the duty officer, pushed the alert, activated the deflective protocol. The convoy rerouted within the hour. The report was logged as signal irregularity. The command trail ended at me. That night, I sat alone in my apartment. The DC skyline through the window. The air conditioner rattling like a memory. Aaron's text had come through just after midnight. Hope DC isn't too boring, sis. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes and sat in the quiet. Years passed like that. Quiet triumphs buried beneath clearance layers. Silence mistaken for absence. Every promotion came with a thicker folder of restrictions. Every citation redacted. I had once been offered a ribbon for technical excellence. It arrived in the mail. No ceremony. No letter. Just the ribbon in a plastic sleeve. Aaron called me that week, excited. He'd been offered command. They're finally seeing what I'm capable of, he said. I listened. Congratulated him. Said I was proud. Our parents threw a small party. Dad made a toast about real leadership. He lifted his glass to Aaron's service, then turned toward me with a smile that had no warmth. Maybe one day we'll get Rachel back into the real world, he said. The room laughed politely. Later that night, Aaron asked if I could help him write a speech. You're good with words, right? He joked. I'll do the soldiering. You do the grammar. I nodded. Went home. Typed the speech. Deleted my name from the draft. The 4th of July after that, Aaron stood in his dress blues and told a story about leadership in the field. Our parents beamed. Mom set a plate of food in front of me and said, you should come to church more. We could find someone. I smiled. Ate in silence. No one asked what I was working on. No one asked where I'd been. No one ever did. And still I stayed. I kept showing up. I kept scanning, decoding, intervening when it mattered. Not because of the recognition, but because people like Aaron, even if they didn't know it, depended on people like me. But today something cracked. 2 days ago we stopped a breach. A major one. It could have gutted the intel infrastructure across 6 theaters. The moment the alert came through, I'd been in the vault for 19 straight hours. We locked it down with minutes to spare. No one outside that room will ever know what we did. And today I was left standing outside Fort Liberty as a guard with a checklist shook his head. Sorry, ma'am. You're not on the list. I looked down at my hands. Still steady. Still uninvited. Behind the glass, Aaron sipped champagne and smiled for photographs. But something else had begun to shift. And I could feel it, the slow, deliberate weight of recognition moving toward the surface. I didn't know it yet, but tomorrow General Dalton Miller would summon me to his office. And he would call me by my first name. 2 days after we stopped the breach, I was called to the Pentagon. The summons came through the secure line at 6:15 a.m., and I was already at my desk. The vault never really slept, and neither did I, not when threats lingered like coiled wires waiting to spark. I signed out of the terminal, slipped on my regulation coat, and walked the corridors I knew by heart. out through the reinforced checkpoints, past the low buzz of fluorescent silence. The hallway outside General Dalton Miller's office smelled faintly of cedar polish and paper. His aide opened the door without a word. Inside, morning light leaked through slats in the blinds. A single mug of coffee steamed on the table. He stood as I entered. Didn't ask for ID. Didn't glance at credentials. Just said, "Rachel." My name, not my title. I stopped short. He motioned toward the chair across from his desk, then poured a second coffee. No sugar. No cream. Just as I took it. 12 men came home because of your decision, he said, settling into his seat. 12. Including one who happens to be stationed at Fort Liberty. I believe you know him. I nodded, saying nothing, letting the weight settle in the silence. The president knows, Miller said. I know. And the right people will know. He reached over to a shelf and pulled down a small case. Brushed the dust from its edge with a single thumb. This, he said, is the Defense Superior Service Medal. I recognized the case, the shape, the ribbon. I also recognized the tone in his voice, measured, deliberate. Not performative. He wasn't trying to flatter. He was acknowledging something overdue. We can't award it publicly. Not until clearance shifts. But the recognition, it's not a formality. It's a correction. His eyes scanned mine. I'll present it to you myself. Quietly. I understand your brother's recognition event is this weekend. A statement, not a question. I looked at the metal case in his hand. Didn't reach for it. Just let it sit there on the edge of the table like a truth half-spoken. On his wall was a photograph, Miller, younger, in fatigues, surrounded by his unit in Mosul. Sand in the air. Fatigue in the eyes. There were no smiles, only purpose. I looked back at him. He nodded once. We'll do it together. The silence hung between us. Not uncomfortable. Just true. When I finally stood, he offered his hand. Admiral Monroe, he said evenly. Thank you. I didn't correct him. Technically, I wasn't an admiral. Not yet. But maybe I would be. Not for the rank. Not for the name. But because someone had finally chosen to look past the silence and see what had always been there. The morning of the gala, I returned home to Tennessee. Not to stay, just long enough to unlock a drawer in my father's old study. The mahogany was worn smooth from decades of fingertips, oil and dust mixing where his hand had always rested. Inside, beneath folders of VA paperwork and maps folded with surgical precision, was a single envelope. Yellowed. No stamp. My mother's handwriting. I hadn't known it existed. Rachel, I always knew you were doing something important. I just wish I had said it out loud. I read the words twice. Then folded them carefully and slid them into the lining of my coat, beside a brass button that had once belonged to my grandfather's World War II uniform. The button was tarnished, worn smooth at the edges. He'd carried it through Saipan, through the jungle, through the long years of silence after. Now I would carry it to Fort Liberty. Under my black trench coat, I wore full dress whites. The color crisp, the lines sharp. No medals visible. The Defense Superior Service Medal remained in its case, still tucked in a side compartment. Unpresented. But waiting. When I arrived at the gate, the same guard stood watch. He began to speak some version of "Ma'am, you're not." But then headlights appeared from behind. A black sedan rolled up. The window lowered. General Dalton Miller. Admiral Monroe, he said calmly, stepping out of the vehicle. We were expecting you. The guard straightened, mouth parting slightly. The clipboard in his hands lowered as his eyes adjusted to what he was seeing. I nodded at him once, then walked past without breaking stride. People turned as we entered. The gala hall was a cathedral of rank, sharp collars, glinting epaulets, glass in ceremony, and soft orchestral music. Aaron stood near the center stage, flanked by officers and family. He hadn't seen me yet. General Miller led me to the front row. There were murmurs now. I scanning the back of the room, following the sound of our shoes against the marble. Miller climbed the stage slowly, holding a single card in his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, before we recognize tonight's honorees, I must ask your attention for a correction. A story long overdue. He glanced at me, then into the audience. Some acts of service do not wear stripes, he said. They are not captured in headlines or parades. They are classified, buried. But without them, others would not return. And some of you in this room, he paused, locking eyes with Aaron, owe your lives to such unseen work. He held up the card. Commander Rachel Monroe is being awarded the Defense Superior Service Medal for actions that diverted a targeted strike and saved 12 lives. Gasps rippled. I saw Aaron's expression shift, a stunned confusion, then disbelief, then something I hadn't seen in him in years, silence. Miller turned toward me. And this he lifted the brass button from my hand belonged to her grandfather. Passed through Saipan. Carried through silence. And now through this. He pinned the metal above my heart. Not with a dramatic flourish. Just a firm press and a look that said everything. Then he stepped back. And that's when it happened. A man in black stepped forward from the far right of the stage. His posture stiff, badge clipped to his coat. "Sir," he said sharply, addressing Miller. "I represent Naval Counterintelligence. The operation tied to this citation is still under restriction. You are not authorized to disclose." The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Miller looked down. Then back up. Then let them court-martial me. He faced the crowd again. "Some stories are due." And he began to read. He read only what was necessary, not the files, not the technicalities. Just the decisions. The night the system blinked red and one person had seen what the machine had missed. The call that was made. The lives that were saved. Aaron remained still. His wife, hands clasped, was watching me now. Not as a sister. As something else. When it ended, no applause came. Only a silence heavier than anything I'd ever heard. Then slowly they stood. Not for the rank. Not for the medal. But because someone had finally been seen. The morning after the ceremony, my inbox was full. Messages from names I hadn't heard in years. Quiet congratulations. Words like, honored, long overdue, proud to serve with you. Most didn't say much. Just small acknowledgements. But I knew the ones that mattered, the ones that came with no emojis, no attached selfies from the event. Just lines like, "You made that call. I'm alive because you did." One message came from a lieutenant I had never met. He'd been in the 6th vehicle in Aaron's convoy. Injured later in Fallujah. Now training cyber recruits at Annapolis. He wrote, "We tell our cadets about sacrifice. I'll tell them about you. That one I saved." By noon, I received a courier envelope. Plain. No insignia. Inside, a formal promotion packet. My name at the top, Admiral Rachel E. Monroe. The assignment, Special Deputy to Naval Strategy and Cryptologic Systems. A role I hadn't applied for but had seen listed once before. Clearance required a fresh NDA. 10 pages. Dense legal language. A section highlighted in yellow. No public disclosure, verbal or written, of contributions tied to Operation Tundra Sky or related missions. Violation will constitute breach of federal protocol subject to. I stopped reading. At the bottom, a space for my signature. The office in DC was waiting. The role was real. The title was power. But the cost was silence. Again. And this time I would be helping shape the very narrative that erased people like me. I closed the folder slowly. Then I stood, walked to the window and watched the sun lift over the quiet roofs of Arlington. A dozen floors below, the street moved with normal life. Tourists, buses, a woman jogging past with her hair in a tight bun. I thought of the girls at the academy. The ones who didn't get asked to the front row. The ones told to network more or be more visible. The ones whose minds could stop wars but were asked to hand out coffee. I walked back to the desk. Signed the envelope, but not the signature line. Instead, I wrote one sentence on a sticky note and placed it inside the folder before sealing it shut. If I sign this, the girls at the academy will be told again that we're just personnel on paper. I don't agree. Then I walked away. Not out of protest. Out of clarity. Some stories deserve to remain classified. But not the people inside them. 6 months later, I returned home. Tennessee in early spring was all dogwood bloom and warm breezes curling across the porch steps. The old house was quiet. My father's Buick was parked under the carport. The flag by the mailbox hung limp in the still air. He met me at the door. No speech. Just a long look. His hair had thinned. His hands shook slightly. But his eyes were clear. "Come," he said. "I want to show you something." Inside the living room, the wall opposite the fireplace had changed. Where there had once been framed campaign medals and a mounted saber, his now stood a new glass case. At its center, lit by a soft bulb, was my Defense Superior Service Medal. Below it, the folded letter from my mother, yellowed but preserved. And beside that, a single brass button. Polished. Set on a small velvet mount. My father stood beside me. "I didn't understand," he said quietly. "Not until now. What it meant. What you gave." He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. His voice cracked on the edges. You've changed everything. I didn't say anything. Didn't have to. We stood there in silence, the only sound the hum of the display light. Outside, the wind lifted. The dogwood shifted. And somewhere down the road, a girl in a ROTC shirt walked with a stack of books pressed to her chest. She didn't look back. But she didn't need to. There are people who serve with medals pinned to their chests and names carved in granite. And there are others. People whose service lives in sealed files and decisions made in quiet rooms with no windows, where recognition comes too late, or not at all. Rachel Monroe was one of those. She didn't ask to be remembered. She asked to be seen. And when the moment came, she stood not for herself, but for all the others buried under acronyms and clearances and words like support role. She turned down silence. She turned down ceremony. She chose truth. Her story reminds us, dignity is earned in silence but must be named aloud. Sometimes the fight isn't to be seen, it's to redefine what visibility means. Not all uniforms carry weapons. Some carry nations. And the weight of that, even when unseen, deserves to be saluted.